Right. Hi, welcome to Fiveable. I'm Carolyn Castellanos, and I will be your host tonight. If y'all could just let me know in the chat, can you hear me okay? My internet's been really slow. I turned off my modem and restarted it, so hopefully everything's working okay, but just let me know. Okay, good. Sandra can hear me. If I lose you, I'll just kind of restart and I don't know. I've never had that happen, but hopefully we won't have to worry about that. It's just been a little off. Okay, well, it's Tuesday and we're doing the evidence portion of the DBQ. Okay, so all right, so today we're doing the evidence part, and then tomorrow Eric is going to do another SAQ, so answering the short answer at 9, and I believe there's student examples, so that's going to be really great working through those, so try to tune in for that. And then for the rest of our DBQ series, also tomorrow, 11 p.m. Eastern. It's a little late if you're on the East Coast, but hopefully you can stay up or watch the replay. Evan's going to do the contextualization point, and then the following day, Melissa will do the reasoning point. And so you can get 2 points out of the reasoning. So all very, very important. And then we've already done the thesis point, which is pretty important. So hopefully you got that one. So those are what's coming up soon. Today we're going to look at the rubric for evidence. So we're going to look at what you need to do to get those evidence points, and then we're going to analyze the documents, and we're going to practice writing with the evidence and then the outside evidence. And this will all make sense in a few minutes. Okay, so I'm taking some of Melissa's slides because she did an overview of the DBQ. And so this is one of her slides where, you need the thesis, the context, and today we're going to, of course, do supporting with evidence, right? That's what we're doing today. And I wish I got to talk about the unicorns, but Melissa gets that one. So today we're, the evidence points, you can get these. These are not the magical unicorn points where, readers say things like, I can't tell you how to do it, but I know it when I see it. And that actually aggravates me as a teacher because there's no such thing as a unicorn point. There's a way to get those points, and Melissa's going to show you that, and you can do it. Okay, so we're looking at some evidence from the documents and evidence beyond the documents. Okay, so a quick look at the rubric. So if you didn't tune in to the other DBQ streams, that's okay. We're going to go back through the prompt. We will focus on evidence, but we'll get you caught up, so don't feel like you missed anything. Okay, so when we're looking here, so you can get 3 possible points. So this is really great. 3 points, and I've got a great way to show you kind of how to do this kind of easy. So you get 1 point if you use the content from at least 3 documents to just address the prompt. So you're not making an argument, you're just kind of describing, so go here, describing what's in the documents, right? Describing that evidence, and of course we never want to quote, we want to know what you, the student, thinks about them and what you have to say about them. So this is not like English where you want to provide textual evidence. We want to know what you kind of think about the documents or what you can gather from them. So if you describe 3 of the documents, you can get a point. So that's actually pretty easy to do. And then with at least 6 of the documents, you need to use them to support an argument, right? An argument or a thesis statement, which is the same thing basically. And this is actually, you can do this too. And then the last point, sorry, it's putting that little menu down there, use at least 1 additional piece of specific historical evidence beyond that found in the document. So I always call this outside info. So you need a sentence or 2 just explaining something not found in the documents. And a lot of times my students don't do this, and I'm like, this is also an easy point. You can do this, right? Surely you remember something somewhat related to the subject of the document, and I'll show you how to do this as well. Okay, is everybody okay with the rubric so far? Just give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. We'll keep going. Okay, anybody awake out there? All right, let's look at the prompt here. So to refresh you, so the prompt is develop an argument, and this is how College Board is always going to start these. Develop an argument. So they do want you to take a side when they say develop an argument. So you are arguing something, right? You're not just, you know, describing something. Okay, so develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which cultural traditions or belief systems affected the attitude toward merchants and trade in the period 1200 to 1600. Okay, well, let's break down the prompt really quickly. So evaluate the extent to which. So evaluate means determine the significance of or judge. I like to kind of break things down to the easiest point possible. So if I'm a teacher, so I get evaluated a lot, right? The assistant principals come and evaluate my teaching. They're really judging me. Am I doing a good job or not? So for evaluate, I like the word judge. And then the extent to which, it really means how much, right? So how much did cultural traditions or belief systems affect attitudes towards merchants and trade? So let's break this down a little bit more. Where's my next slide? Oh, okay. Hopefully you were able to download the DBQ resources. If not, we've got it all in the slides and you can follow along and kind of take notes. Okay, so we're looking at cultural traditions, right? And so when I think of culture, thinking religion, right? There's probably going to be religion in there, belief systems, probably religion, philosophies. And so this is acting, you know, judge how much your belief systems affected the attitudes towards merchants and trade. So do belief systems support merchants or do they not like them, right? So that's pretty much what this kind of sophisticated prompt is saying. So we've got, now you've got two kind of themes here, culture and trade. All right. The last thing, oh, sorry, these are all animated here. There's three types of essays. So the College Board is either going to ask you to write a cause and effect, a compare and contrast, or change in continuity over time. So this one is a cause and effect essay. And you know this because of the word, you know, how did the belief systems affect attitudes? And so other ways, so causes, they might say, you know, explain the causes of World War I, or they might say what factors led to so-and-so. Factors means causes. And then effects, sometimes they'll just say effects, you know, what were the effects of, I don't know, trade on, I don't know, religion or something, or consequences, right? And so you're always kind of looking to figure out what kind of essay you're writing. The DBQ, it's not quite as important, but you do want to know what you're being asked. Compare and contrast is pretty easy because the word similarities or differences will most likely be in the prompt. And so similarities or comparisons and contrasts or differences. And then change in continuity over time, the prompt usually gives that away. It'll ask for, you know, changes in labor systems, or, you know, how much did something stay the same? Okay, so the first thing I have my students do is rewrite the prompt in their own words. So going off what I said, we would have judge how much cultural traditions or belief systems affected attitudes towards merchants and trade in the period 1200 to 600. And I think we can actually make it a little more simple, or simpler down at the bottom here. So how much did cultural beliefs in general affect attitudes towards merchants and trade, right? That's basically what the prompt is asking us to do. So you always want to try to rewrite the prompt, kind of break it down in your own words, because sometimes they're pretty complicated, and, you know, thinking, what exactly do I have to do? How many things do I have to address? Okay, so now that we've got the prompt under control, This is what we need to look for in the document. So we're looking for cultural beliefs. So that might be religions, customs, something like that. And then attitudes towards merchants and trade. Do they like them? Do they hate them, right? Do they blame them for something? And maybe effects, maybe causes, but actually we're not going to quite get into that. But so we're looking for their beliefs and then attitudes. Okay. I know, and it sounds so easy until you actually start looking at the documents, and then it gets a little tricky. Okay. Let me know if you have any questions. You can type them into the chat. So just type it in, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just kind of keep talking, but I'm sure you're going to have questions. So just throw those out there, or comments, or anything, anytime. Okay, so now we don't have a thesis statement yet. I always have my students go through the documents first, right? So we've got a good prompt, we understand it, but now we've got to look at the documents to figure out what we're arguing and, you know, our thesis statement. Okay, so here's document 1. I hope you're on your computer, not your phone, because it might be a little small, but we'll make it work. Okay, so we see this painting. So I've got this kind of list of things to do. Now, don't get upset that I put 5 things here, because we're gonna start to move through these 5 things really quickly. So the first thing you always want to do is read the source. And so we've got the source up here. Well, I'll do that on the next slide. And then you want to, you know, kind of identify facts in the documents. And then we're going to make inferences about the documents. And then the most important thing is you always want to answer, how does the document answer the prompt? And once my students started doing that, they really started to rack up the points on their essays, because somehow that's the part they would leave out, right? It seems like you should be answering the prompt, but it's really easy to not quite do that. And then what outside info do I know? Okay, so let's start with the first thing. All right, so so you want to look at the source, right? So all this kind of outside info. So this would be, you know, on top of the document here, giving you a little help. And the source usually gives some information away, and it's going to help you out a lot. Okay, so our source is a painting from the Buddhist cave temples. Okay, so one of the big things we were looking for was cultural beliefs, right? So Buddhism's a cultural belief. Okay, so we know this is probably going to be what Buddhism says about merchants, right? Okay, so the Buddhist cave temples in Bezeklik, Central Asia, about 800 CE. The painting shows the Buddha and Bodhisattvas blessing Central Asian traders bearing gifts for the Bezeklik temples. Okay, so I think we know who Buddha is. Bodhisattvas are priests. It says Buddhist holy figures. And so with Mahayana Buddhism, one of the branches of Buddhism, where they start to develop kind of not just your regular Buddhist monks, but more of priests that kind of stop their journey to nirvana to help others reach nirvana. So that's what those are. Okay, so from here, what do you think the attitude towards merchants is going to be? Do Buddhists like merchants, or do they not like them? Go ahead and answer in the chat. Make sure you guys are on your toes. So what do you think? Just reading that source, does Buddhism like merchants or not so much? Anyone? Did you guys type it in here? Okay. Well, y'all are feeling shy. That's right. Okay, thank you. All right, we've got yes. Okay, so so we haven't quite looked at the picture, and we've already got an idea of what's happening, right? Okay, so now so we've got the source, right? And a lot of times this helps you with point of view, which Melissa will cover in a couple days. So just kind of keep that in mind. So she's going to go back to looking at the source. Sometimes it helps us with evidence, and sometimes not so much. All right, so the next thing I do is have my students next to the document jot down some facts. So if we're just looking at that kind of sourcing statement, where there's Buddhist paintings in the temples, Buddha, the priests are blessing traders who give gifts to the temple. And then when I looked at the picture, I saw some caravan animals down here. I think that's a donkey. And then people are making offerings. He's got something on a tray that, you know, some kind of offerings. So those are my facts. So kind of jot that down, right? And then the next thing I have students do is make inferences about the document. So after looking at those facts, what conclusions can you draw? And so these are the ones I did. So the painting depicts Mahayana Buddhism. Now, so if you don't remember Mahayana Buddhism, it's one of the branches that is okay with materialism, wealth accumulation, and they have the Bodhisattvas, and they really wanted large donations to their temples. Buddha becomes a god, and they have a concept, they now add in heaven and hell. So this is kind of a big deviation from traditional Buddhism, but because I know Mahayana, I can kind of draw that. Now, if you don't know Mahayana Buddhism, that's okay. You're still going to find plenty of evidence in this document. So the next inference I made was Buddhism looked favorably upon merchants and traders, right? I mean, we can tell from the painting, right, and the kind of sourcing information. Also, monasteries along the Silk Road relied on traders for funding, right? These merchants and traders. Okay. So next we're going to do, how does the document answer the prompt? Now your inferences are going to help you with that, right? Sometimes your inferences and how does the document answer the prompt are the same thing. So the prompt was, how did cultural beliefs influence attitudes on merchants? So Buddhism endorsed merchants and trade, and you want to say, so because the painting demonstrates the Buddha blessing merchants who gave gifts to temples along the Silk Road, right? So this one is showing a very favorable attitude towards merchants, right? Buddha is blessing them, so they obviously like them. Okay, so this was a good one, I thought, for outside info. Now, you only have to do the outside information once in your entire essay. I encourage my students to try to do it as much as they can, but there's going to be some documents where you're like, I don't know anything about that. I can't relate it to anything. If you do it once and it's, you know, a good thorough sentence or a couple sentences, you'll get the point. You don't get the point for just like, mentioning a place or one little fact. You've got to explain it. So what is some outside information that I know? Well, I know this, the Silk Road trade, Buddhism was spread by merchants along the Silk Road. The Chinese viewed merchants at the bottom of the social pyramid. The Song and Yuan dynasties promoted trade. Mahayana Buddhism had Bodhisattvas. They turned Buddha into God. They were okay with wealth and materialism. So you could explain any of those things. All right, so let's go. Okay, so let's look back at our rubric points. I'm going to show you how I did this. Okay, so here's my facts here, right? And so we've got to describe rather than simply quote evidence from the documents. So I turned these facts into the sentence down here, and this is what I came up with. And so you want to mention the document. You need to say document 1, according to document 1. A lot of times teachers want you to write out the whole title of the document. But look at this one. This one's long. The painting from the Buddhist cave temple at Bezeklik, Central Asia, blah, blah, blah. Your teacher obviously doesn't want you to write all that out. You could say the painting from the Buddhist cave temples. I have actually broken down and just let my students say document 1. It's maybe not the proper way, but they won't take points off if you call it document 1. Okay, so my facts become my description. And so what I came up with is document 1 is an illustration of the Buddha blessing merchants offering gifts at a temple in Central Asia. So you can see, I'm merely just describing what is happening in the document. So there's no argumentation, not a whole lot of interesting kind of thoughts going on. And if you do this 3 times, you get a point. So It's not too hard. Okay, let me see. There's a question down here. Let me see. Oh, what are Bodhisattvas again? Okay, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. Okay, so let me get my, hold on. Anytime I click on something, it messes everything up. Bodhisattvas are like Buddhist priests. So they're only in Mahayana Buddhism, which I have spelled down here. And so that's a branch of Buddhism that has kind of morphed. And so they are like priests, they're holy figures that have stopped their, I guess, ascension to nirvana to help others on their journey to reach nirvana. And they do this for payment. So they do want to be paid for that. So in my class, I don't know if I guess I critique Mahayana Buddhism because it doesn't sound very Buddhist. You know, Buddhism, you're supposed to reject materialism and wealth, but Mahayana says it's A-okay. And so this is a branch that has kind of evolved so that merchants and people getting wealthy in China can kind of, you know, get into Buddhism. Okay, so that's how, so when you're writing this, so I would write this document 1 as an illustration of the Buddha blessing merchants offering gifts at a temple in Central Asia. And then my next sentences, I could add in some of my inferences. It might get a little repetitive. So when you actually write your essay, you'll pick and choose what to write. But the next part might be the painting depicts Mahayana Buddhism, and I could explain that or not. I'd probably pick the next sentence. Buddhism looks favorably upon merchants and traders. Monasteries along the Silk Road relied on traders for funding. And so those are all kind of facts, right? It's good information about the documents. Now, support an argument, thesis, or paragraph. Okay, so we haven't written a thesis statement. So you're probably thinking, how can I actually support a thesis when I haven't written one yet? Well, if you do your facts, inferences, how does the document answer the prompt? You can do that and it's going to tie into your thesis statement. This is my foolproof, easy method. So your inferences are going to support an argument. And you're arguing how attitude or how cultural traditions affected attitudes. So if you're answering the prompt, you are supporting an argument, right? We don't know how many of the documents are going to look favorably on merchants, how many aren't, but that's basically what you're going to argue. This and this religion supported merchants and this one didn't, or something like that, right? Okay, so Buddhism looks favorably upon merchants and traders. That's going to support your argument. And then how does the document answer the prompt? This is where I fleshed it out a little bit better. And I put Buddhism endorsed merchants and trade because the painting demonstrates the Buddha blessing merchants who gave gifts to the temples along the Silk Road. And then I added a little bit more on this slide. Therefore, religions such as Buddhism affected attitudes towards merchants by portraying them in a positive light. Now, you always kind of want to add that last sentence there, right? Making sure that the reader knows, oh, this one is in favor. This one is supporting merchants, right? And that's often students start writing fast and they kind of miss some of that stuff. Okay, and this is going to go much faster in a second. I'll show you. Now, this is the evidence beyond the documents, right? More than a phrase or reference, different from your historical context. So here's where I would add on. So this is my, how does the document answer the prompt? And then I would say, what did I end up with? Merchants by portraying them in a positive light. So I would add on my outside info here, and I put, which is new for China. The Chinese typically viewed merchants at the bottom of the social pyramid. They thought making money from someone else's work as a middleman was suspect. Did y'all cover that in your classes? China's pretty much the only society that does not like merchants, right? They felt like they don't make the products, they're the middleman. They buy them, they mark up the price, and then they sell them to something else. And they thought that was really sketchy. So I felt like that was a good piece of outside info. You could talk about the Silk Road, you could talk about Mahayana Buddhism, but having a good sentence or two in it anything. With that, I'm done. I don't have any more outside information. Like I said, I had to do a couple times just to make, right. Okay, any questions so far? All right, let's go through the next set. Okay, so that was our one picture. We're done with that. Now all sources that we've got to read. So I'll try to go kind of read them quickly. All right, so again, we're going to look at our source. We're going to identify our facts, make some inferences, make sure we figure out how the document answers the prompt, and see if we know any outside info. Okay, so up here, Department of Asian Art, Scholar Officials of China. So this is a secondary source. So okay, I'm back. I do not know what happened. Okay, is anyone still here? Are y'all still with me? Trying to get this. Okay, I'm so sorry. Yeah, earlier I usually kind of log in nice and early and it just kept losing the video, so I guess that's still happening. All right, let me get my slides back here. All right, sorry for these technical difficulties. And where am I? Presenter view. Okay, these are always my nightmares that I'm gonna be streaming and nothing's gonna work, and then I'm not that great at technology. Okay, all right. Okay, let's get back to where we were. Okay, so we need to pick up the pace or we're gonna be here all night working on this DBQ. Okay, thanks, Sandra. Yeah, all right, I know. Now we have live streaming. It's a great way to teach, but you've got to worry about all these things. Okay, all right, so let's read our document, and I've highlighted to help us out. Okay, so we know it's from China, and so if we read along, beginning in the late 10th century in the early Northern Song, so Song Dynasty, the government bureaucracy was staffed entirely by scholar officials chosen through a civil examination system. The officials ruled the land in the help of local gentry and locally recruited government clerks. Because the governmental superstructure was so thinly spread, it was heavily invested in the Confucian virtue ethic as the binding social force, and when that failed, in the use of harsh punishment for maintaining stability. Okay, so I highlighted this for sure. So we know their governmental system used Confucian virtues as their ethics, and it's a binding social force, right? So this is how they're kind of keeping people in line. Now, if that failed, they used harsh punishments. Okay, so we're trying to see kind of those cultural views, all right? So I'm guessing Confucianism is going to have a say on merchants. Okay. All right, so it's really down at the bottom where I highlighted. The system operated as a mechanism through which the state replaced entrenched local hereditary owners and rich merchants with people whose authority was conferred and could easily be removed by the state. Scholar officials, unlike the other three social classes, did not therefore constitute an economic class as such, as their only power resided in their Confucian ideals and their moral and ethical values. Nevertheless, the landowners, the craftsmen, and the merchants were controlled by the state. So I highlighted that. And the state was administered by the scholar officials who discouraged entrepreneurial endeavor and the accumulation of wealth with the Confucian admonition that acceptance of limitations leads to happiness. Okay, so there's a lot in that document, but down here, this bottom part is really what you need to know. And so I try to tell my students, like, look for the beliefs, the attitudes towards merchants. That's all you've got to find, and forget about all this stuff that's confusing you, right? Okay, so what are our facts? So let's see. Discouraged entrepreneurial endeavor, right? So merchants are entrepreneurs, right? They're businessmen. And the accumulation of wealth. The Confucian admonition. So it's kind of like punishment, discouragement. So they discourage with the acceptance of limitations leads to happiness. Okay, this is not exactly the American dream, but in China a long time ago. Okay, so the facts I pulled out of here: scholar officials or scholar gentry, a civil service exam, Confucian ideals, merchants were controlled by the state. So we have that in here somewhere. Okay, so few facts. So my inferences, China used cultural values to maintain order. Scholar officials following Confucianism discouraged wealth accumulation, so they must view merchants and trade unfavorably. So your inference is very similar to the part 4, how does this document answer the question? So then now, does it answer the prompt? The cultural beliefs that Confucianism contributed to a negative attitude towards merchants and trade because Confucianism was against wealth accumulation. And then, so I think I've got where kind of like the other slides where I put in document 4, blah, 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 or document 2, coming up. So outside info, the only thing I've kind of put, so it needs to be something outside of the document. So you could sit here and write about the civil service exam, but that's not outside of the document, right? That's in here. You couldn't really write about Confucius, right? Confucianism's in the document. I think that merchants are at the bottom of the social pyramid would be perfect, although I already did that in document 1. So that could go with either one of these. Okay, so turning these facts into a description, I came up with this. Document 2 explains the I took the civil service exam and ran the government. So I kind of did my description based off the first part of the document, and that's pretty easy. If you don't totally understand the document, you can probably get that much, right? And then let's see what I did with the inferences here. So supporting an argument or thesis. So pulling from the inferences, and then how does the document answer the prompt? I'd put the cultural beliefs of Confucianism contributed to a negative attitude towards merchants and trade because Confucianism was against the wealth accumulation. And so just molding those sentences together into the paragraph. And then for here, I wouldn't do the outside info. Okay, any questions so far? It actually looks like we have. Let me see if this is the, okay, I answered that question. I'm not going to type it in there. It was on the Bodhisattvas, if I'm saying that right. Oh, shoot, where? get my slides back. Okay, my screen looks a little different from yours. Okay, let me know how we're doing so far. Okay, document 3. Again, we're going to do the same thing. So our source here, so we have one document that's cool with merchants, one not cool at all with merchants. This one is Thomas Aquinas, a leading scholastic theologian, and it's from Summa Theologica 1273. Thomas Aquinas, I believe, was a saint in the Catholic Church. So we know this is going to be Christianity, and then we see Matthew, is that volume 12 to, oh, it's been a long time since my Catholic schooling. But so we know this is going to be Christianity here. Okay, so this was kind of a long one. So what I did here was, it didn't quite line up, but for my facts, I'm just putting the main ideas found in the paragraph. So my sourcing, I've got, he's Catholic. And then this paragraph, I've got the Bible and the golden rule. So let's kind of go back and read it. Okay. It is written in Matthew, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you also to them. But no man would, okay, so that's do to others as you would have them do to you, or the golden rule, right? Treat people the way you want to be treated. But no man wishes to buy a thing for more than it's worth. Therefore, no man should sell a thing to another man for more than it's worth. Okay, so right here, I'm seeing, okay, this is about merchants, right? And so from here, I'm basically saying the Bible says you shouldn't mark up prices, right? Sell something for what it's worth. Don't sell it for more, and you really shouldn't sell it for less. Okay, let's look at this paragraph. I answer that it is altogether sinful to have recourse to deceit in order to sell a thing for more than its just price, because this is to deceive one's neighbor so as to injure him. Hence, Tully or Cicero, the Roman writer, says, contracts should be entirely free from double dealing. The seller must not impose upon the bidder, nor the buyer upon one that bids against him. Okay, so kind of the same thing, right? Be honest when, you're buying and selling things. Next paragraph. Therefore, if either the price exceed the quantity of the thing's worth, or conversely, the thing exceed the price, there is no longer the equality of justice. And consequently, to sell a thing for more than it's worth, or to buy it for less than it's worth, is in itself unjust and awful. Okay, so again, shouldn't buy or sell something for more than it's worth. And even I think it's kind of getting in at the buyer, right? Like you shouldn't try to get the price down. You shouldn't bargain too much. No man should sell what is not his, though he may charge for the loss he suffers. Okay, so don't sell stolen goods. You can recoup the loss from theft. Okay, so does that make sense? So sometimes with the longer ones, kind of get the main idea of each paragraph and see if that has something to do with the prompt. And it looks like it does, right? Okay. My students tend to just really get lost in these long paragraphs. And I'm like, you got to just kind of get those keywords, right? Okay, so our facts. It's probably Catholic or Christianity. We see the Bible, the golden rule. Bible says you shouldn't mark up prices, shouldn't buy or sell something for more than it's worth. Don't sell stolen goods. You can recoup the loss from theft. Okay, so how would I put this into a description? So I'll just do, according to document 3, the Bible preaches against merchants marking up prices and selling stolen goods. And I think that's good. This was a really long 3 or 4 paragraphs kind of saying the same thing, right? So again, pick what you understand in the document and go with it. Go with your first instincts. They're almost always right. So my inferences. So again, I'm thinking, so is this favorable towards merchants or not? And I think it's favorable towards merchants who are being fair, right? So that's my inference. Some merchants are dishonest if they overcharge for goods, and this is immoral. Or another inference, merchants and trades are okay if they are honest and do not cheat customers. Does that sound fair? Okay, so how do we kind of support our argument or thesis? So how does the document answer the prompt. So I would write something like, the Christian Bible preaches against merchants marking up prices, cheating customers, and selling stolen goods. Therefore, Christianity has shaped skeptical views towards merchants. But merchants and trade are okay if they are honest and do not cheat customers. So I'm, kind of getting that all in there. And so if it's a little tricky. Is this really saying merchants are great? It's only the honest ones, right? So it's kind of skeptical there. Okay, the outside info. So I know Saul or St. Paul spread Christianity, but I had to go Google. I thought he was a merchant and spread Christianity on the trade routes, but I was kind of wrong. He was a tent maker. So if you knew that, you could say the tents were probably used by caravanners and, pastoral nomads. So Paul would have used merchants to sell them, so he couldn't be against them. But I think that's a stretch. I don't think most students are going to know that. Excuse me. So I don't know. I don't feel real comfortable doing the outside information with this document, but maybe you could do something on the bottom. Christianity was spread by missionaries, not by traders along trade routes like Buddhism and Islam. But I would probably leave it out for that one. Okay, that was a little tricky. Okay, document 4. All right. So our source is Ibn Khaldun, a leading Muslim scholar, the Universal History. So we've got a history book here, history document, and it's from the 14th century. So this one's 14th would be 1300s. Okay, so kind of my sourcing as Muslim scholar, 1300s. Ooh, what's happening in the 1300s? We're in the middle of the Crusades. Melissa might kind of use this for point of view. I don't think the Crusades are going to come in our analysis. Okay, let's see. I highlighted a lot here. Okay, so let's read through the document and kind of highlight and look at our facts. The manners of tradesmen are inferior to those of rulers and far removed from manliness and uprightness. Oh my gosh, do they not like merchants? Okay, tradesmen are inferior and they're not manly or upright. Okay, I actually thought Islam was going to be in favor of merchants, but let's keep reading. We have already stated that traders must buy and sell and seek profits. This necessitates flattery. Okay, so what it means there is you flatter the seller. Oh my God, have you lost weight? Hoping they'll pay more for the product, right? It necessitates flattery and evasiveness, right? So they're evasive, like they're not giving you all the information. So when you go to a restaurant and you ask, oh my gosh, is the mahi good? And when the waiter's like, I don't know, I've never had it. And you're like, okay, how's the burger? Oh, I've never had the burger here. Okay, if the waiter won't eat at the restaurant they work at, you need to run out of there because you're going to get sick. It's going to be bad, right? So if, they're evasive, you're asking all kinds of questions about the product and they're not really answering you, it's because it's a bad product, right? Okay, this necessitates flattery and evasiveness, litigation and disputation. All right, litigation, so lawsuits, and disputes, all of which are characteristics of this profession. Ooh, gosh, they don't really like merchants, right? And these qualities lead to a decrease and weakening in virtue and manliness, for these acts inevitably affect the soul. Okay, so if you're having to be sneaky to sell your products and mark up the prices, it affects your soul. Okay, so it's sinful, right? Okay. Down here, as for trade, although it be a natural means of livelihood, yet most of trade is natural, trade is okay. Yet most of the methods it employs are tricks aimed at making a profit. Okay, so everyone's saying the same thing. Trade is fine, but if you're trying to make a profit and drive up prices, it's not good. Okay, by securing the difference between the buying and the selling, and by appropriating the surplus, this is why religious law allows the use of such methods, which, although they come under the heading of gambling, yet do not constitute the taking without return of other people's goods. Okay, that last line is really important. It's saying, look, it's not gambling, like trading for profit is okay because it's not gambling and the people get a good in return, right? You're not stealing their money. They're getting a product. Shame on them for paying too much. Shame on you for charging too much. Does that make sense? Okay, so what facts, sorry, these are long. It's hard to do the DBQ in a stream. Okay, so my facts: merchants are inferior, unmanly, they flatter people to sell products. They are evasive and withhold info about the products. They end up in lawsuits and disputes. But then I also have trade is natural. Merchants use tricks to drive a profit. Religious law, or Sharia law, allows this because it's not technically stealing. Okay, so how do I turn this into a description? So I put according to Ibn Khaldun. So instead of putting according to document 4, I put his name. So you could do that, or you could do according to the universal history, just to change it up. So according to Ibn Khaldun, a Muslim scholar, merchants were often deceitful because they flattered customers and were evasive about their products. But trade is a natural job and allowable by Muslim law. So I just kind of, rounded these facts up into the gist of the facts, right? Okay, so my inferences on bottom. Trade was necessary and natural, but has evolved into profit in silver or gold since the time of bartering. So if you remember, bartering is where you just trade products. I'll trade some wheat for, I don't know, a pig, right? So even though merchants employ dishonest means to drive up prices, it is not considered stealing and allowable by Islam. So it's kind of similar there. Okay, so big thing on this one. So I like my description. I think my description may have had some inferences in it, but how does this document answer the prompt? Okay, so Islam views trade as a natural and necessary process. However, Islam does not condone dishonest merchants who flatter, cheat, and drive up prices. Therefore, Islam has also shaped a skeptical view against merchants, but not trade. All right, so would you say that's fair, right? They're skeptical of dishonest merchants, but not so much trade. So this would pair well with, if we're thinking about paragraphs, we might put this one in with the Christianity one from Matthew, right? Okay, outside info. Okay, I didn't like this document because I thought Islam really liked merchants, right? So for my outside info, I put Muhammad, the prophet and founder of Islam, was a merchant. The Quran often mentions merchants and business as a noble profession, right? Muhammad was a merchant. Obviously, Muhammad was an honest merchant, right? Being the prophet of Islam. So, but now, when was that? Like first century when Muhammad was around? So I put a lot has changed in the 12 to 1300 years since Muhammad's lifetime. In the 14th century, less bartering is happening and merchants are demanding that goods are paid with coins or paper money, right? Those are new inventions. Therefore, it's easier for merchants to price gouge, right? Or mark up the prices. So now, if you don't know all of this stuff, that's okay. Just try to write what you can. And so even just kind of talking about how Muhammad was a merchant, that would probably get you, that outside info point. But as much as you can add in there, the better, right? And these essays are long. And so the reader, you don't want to kind of hide things, right? You want it obvious that this is the outside info. So, the reader's like, oh, got it. Check that box. You get a point for that. Okay, we're going to keep going. I'm going to try not to keep you here too much past 8 o'clock. Okay, document 5, letters to and from Italian merchants in the 14th century. Okay, so we've got Italian merchants here. Okay, letters ordering religious paintings for sale. Okay, so let's just read the highlighted parts. Well, it's kind of hard. A panel of Our Lady on a background of fine gold with 2 doors. Okay, so they want a panel with Mary on it, making a fine show with good and handsome figures by the best painter. let there be in the center our Lord on the cross, Our Lady, whomsoever you find, I care not, so that the figures be handsome and large, the best and finest you can purvey. Okay, so buy me a beautiful painting with Mary and Jesus on the cross. But here's the kicker. And the cost no more than 5.5 or 6.5 florins. Okay, so he's got a budget, right? You tell me you can find no pictures for the money we will pay, for there are none so cheap, and therefore we bid you. Okay, he's like, so if you can't find a really great picture painting for 5.5 or 6.5 florins, that's okay. If you find no good things at a fair cost, leave them, for here there is no great demand. He's like, look, I want this, but only at this price. And then he says they should be bought when the master artist who makes them is in need. So who's cheating who now? He's like, oh, well, we'll wait because that artist will need money. And in a few months, he'll be broke and he'll sell the painting for less. So maybe merchants are sneaky. Okay, let's look at the next one. Letter from a merchant's mother. You know, God has granted you to acquire great riches in this world. May he be praised. And you have borne and are bearing great burdens. Wait, so you acquired great riches and now you're bearing great burdens. Pray toil not so hard. Toil means to work. So, okay, son, you're rich, you're working too hard, only for the good of strangers, right? You're a merchant, but you're helping out those strangers, those people buying your stuff. Let some remembrance of you remain here and someone to pray to God on your behalf. Crave not for all. You have already enough to suffice you. Okay, so I think his mom is like, retire. You've done enough. You're working too hard. You're good. Let's look at the last one. Letter placing an order for English wool. You say you have writ to Venice to remit us 1,000 ducats, with which, this one was really hard to read, with which in the name of God and prophet, you would have us buy Cotswold wool. Okay. So Venice wants 1,000 ducats worth of wool. Cotswold is in England. With God always before us, we will carry out your bidding. Okay, so they're saying, I'll get you your 1,000 ducats worth of this wool. All right, so this one was a little tricky. So my facts, let's start with the facts. Venice merchants buy religious paintings, but have a budget. Merchants work hard, make a lot of money. Yeah, I kind of didn't like the mom's letter. Venice merchants are buying English wool, lots of giving thanks to God. So I went and kind of in pink, like, because we're looking for those cultural beliefs or religions shaping the attitude towards merchants or trade. And so it looks like they're thanking God for their good fortune, right? And for their trading. And so I think that's going to be important and probably something we want to put in our essay. Okay, so how did I turn that into a description? So I came up with document 5 is a series of letters from Venice merchants. And then just kind of write what you understand. So the letters reveal that merchants want a good deal when purchasing their merchandise. They work hard, but make a lot of money. And they order 1,000 ducats of wool at a time. And so if you're confused by these little letters, you can probably pull some of this out, right? It's a series of letters. You know, merchants want a good price. And you don't have to describe the entire document. You could just, you know, do this part. Just trying to buy a religious painting, but won't pay too much. You don't have to do, you know, all parts. Okay, so inferences. So what I'm kind of gathering is merchants are always looking for a good deal and they will wait to purchase goods at a lower price, even if that's bad for the seller, right? They want to wait till that artist is broke, till, you know, it's after Christmas, he bought too many Christmas presents and he needs money. Merchants believe God has blessed and enabled their success, right? And so this is kind of the big inference they're hoping you'll pick up on, that they think it's okay to be a merchant, that they're successful at it. You know, if they weren't, that God is blessing this. God is saying it's okay. So we've got that other Christian document with, you know, the part of the Bible from Matthew, kind of like, don't cheat people. But over here, they're like, oh, well, you know, I mean, God must be looking favorably on me. A lightning bolt hasn't hit me, right? I'm doing really good at my job. This must be okay. And so that's an inference, right? You're kind of making a conclusion, right? You're kind of pulling something out that may or may not be there, but it's there, right? Okay, so I kind of maybe add some of this in, and then how does the document answer the prompt? Okay, so does this one look favorably upon merchants or not? Kind of think it's another one of those skeptical ones. Document 5 provides evidence for both sides of the story. So that's what I was really kind of feeling here. The letters reveal that merchants can be sneaky or always looking for the cheapest price, even though they make plenty of money. On the other hand, merchants believe God has blessed their success. And so it's whatever you feel comfortable writing. If you want to kind of talk about both sides of the story, that's fine. If you didn't pick up on the fact that it's kind of doing both sides, that's okay too. Whichever one works, because this one is kind of both for and against. And you can use the document in any way, right? The way you write about, if I didn't do both sides, you could just do, they reveal they're sneaky, right? So, kind of this is against it. Or if you want to put God has, blessed those merchants and it's for it, then that's fine too. Okay, we got 2 more documents. The outside info on the bottom. Okay, this was another one where I probably wouldn't do the outside info just because it's not my area of expertise, but you could add in like Italy had several ports that kept trading throughout the Black Plague, like Venice and Genoa, and I can't remember the third one. Italian merchants were really wealthy. Florence began banking and financing trade and stuff like that. They're, most likely Catholic, although this would be after the Protestant Reformation, so you could maybe add that in. But yeah, in the outside info, again, you only have to do it once, do it well, something you can write a couple sentences about, and you'll be okay. Okay, document 6 is a little bit shorter. Okay, so our source, Islamic court decision. Oh yeah, this was a tricky one again. So we've got another Muslim document here. Okay, so Islamic court decision in Kara, 17th century. So this is quite a bit later, 1600s. But representative of Turkish guild practices in the 15th and 16th centuries. Okay, so we know the Turks, probably the Ottoman Turks, it's where we're probably the area we're talking about, and guilds. So remember, guilds are like kind of like unions, right? And so these were going to be weavers, right? So there's a weavers guild. They come together and kind of work together. So let's read on. Let's see what it has to say. Okay, so it says the content of this document is that Mahed and Hassi Mahed and others from the Weavers Guild summoned to court Sakagalu Nasu, we'll call him Nasu, from the said guild and said in complaint. Okay, so Mahed and Mahed are upset about Nasu, and they've summoned him to court. Okay, so let's see what their complaint is. What did Nasu do? And they said, whenever cotton yarn comes to town, the aforementioned arrives, pays an extra price, and takes it from its owner, and the other weavers remain deprived of cotton yarn. Okay, so he's showing up early. He's like, pay me, I'll pay you more. Sew me all of the cotton, and I'm going to go weave a bunch of clothes or whatever and make money. And all the other weavers aren't going to get any of the cotton. So he's kind of hoarding the business, right? Now, a guild, people come and work together. So normally the guild, they would go to the merchant, they'd all agree, all the guild members would say, okay, we're only going to pay, so many pennies for so many pounds of cotton. That way, it was affordable, and it kind of forced the merchant to give them that price, right? So this guy, I can see why they're upset at him, right? He's hogging all the cotton. Okay, as of old, when cotton yarn came, we all bought it together. The aforementioned has now acted contrary to the old custom. We do not agree to this. The okay, so they're like, look, our old custom, he's not honoring that. The aforementioned was warned emphatically that when cotton yarn, was warned emphatically that when cotton yarn comes once more, he should not buy it alone, but rather that it should be distributed among all. Whereupon the aforementioned took it upon himself to behave in the manner said. Okay, so he's done this multiple times and they are fed up. Okay, so what kind of facts can I pull out of this? Cotton Guild, Cotton Guild of Weavers used to buy the cotton together so that everyone had some and they all paid the same price. Now, Sub buys it all himself, pays extra, and he is the only one with the cotton. All right, so he's hogging the cotton, so this is not good. So my description, I put, document 6 describes a court testimony where a weaver repeatedly cheated the guild. He would arrive early, pay extra, and purchase all of the cotton such that no other weaver had any cotton to weave. Okay, so that makes sense. Inferences, I think Nasa is bribing the merchant selling the cotton, right? Because, you know, the merchant's got to keep coming to the city and those other weavers are going to be mad at him. He's paying extra. If you're paying extra, that sounds like a bribe, right? Nasa is trying to reduce competition, obviously, right? They don't have anything to weave. So you could maybe kind of add those sentences in your paragraph. So how does this answer the question, the prompt? Okay, so I was a little confused on this document because I don't think that the document doesn't reveal the court's decision. So I don't, and it's an Islamic court, right? And so they often, you know, religious and civil law was tied together, right? In this Ottoman Empire. So they're one and the same. So I wasn't sure if it was kind of the guild's decision or the court's, like, did he get punished for it or not? So I would have really liked that. That would have made it easier to say Islam is against this or whatnot, but we can still come up with something. So I put document 6 involves weavers who are upset that another weaver is bribing the merchant who sells cotton. While the document is part of an Islamic court decision, it is not very religious. The weavers seem more upset at the weaver than the merchant, right? They're not so upset about the guy selling the cotton. They're upset about the one merchant or the one weaver who's hogging it, right? So therefore, sometimes attitudes towards merchants and trade were shaped by economics, right? So to me, this wasn't so much the cultural or traditional beliefs, but that just may be me in teacher mode, kind of thinking too much about it. I think you could also put that, where was I going with this? That this is still a cultural tradition because I was kind of focusing on religion, but this is definitely a cultural tradition, right? We always went and paid for the cotton together. You broke that. So that's kind of our cultural, our tradition. We do this in our city. So this is probably me having, you know, been to grad school, thinking about it too hard. And the students will probably just be like, he's breaking a tradition, and that's fine. I would go with that. Outside info, if you want to talk about guilds or kind of co-ops where, you know, farmers and workers come together, you could do that. Maybe a little more about the Sharia law. I would probably just stay away from that if it were me, just not wanting to kind of say something wrong. Okay, let's go through. Okay, last one. All right. Okay, from Yuan Huang, if I'm saying that right, Meritorious Deeds at No Cost. So it's a book, a Neo-Confucian book of moral instruction for a mass audience, 17th century. Okay, so another religious document, Neo-Confucianism, moral instruction for a mass audience. So this is kind of like a how-to, you know, for Neo-Confucianism. Okay, so dealers and merchants. So part of this manual, right, is about dealers and merchants. It says, do not use short measure when selling and long measure when buying. So I think you want to sell high for a high price and buy for a low price. It seems like they did it backwards, but I think that's what they're trying to say there. Give fair value when you exchange silver for copper coins, especially when changing money for the poor. Be generous to them. So if you've ever traveled to a foreign country and you want to exchange your American dollars for euros, you go where there's the best rate of exchange. And so the money changers get a percentage, right? That's why they say actually use your credit card, because you'll get the best kind of rate of exchange with your credit card or bank card. So they're like, but look at this. This is interesting. When you're dealing with the poor, be generous to them, right? Don't charge them too much. You can tell they're poor. Let's read on. When a debtor owes you a small sum but is short of money, have mercy and forget about the difference. Okay, so they owe you money. You know they're short on money. Just let it go, man. If it's a small amount, okay, well, how many merchants? Like, we need Neo-Confucianism in America. I would like my debts forgiven. So I got a feeling the merchants aren't going to like this. Let's see. Do not bring him to bankruptcy and hatred by refusing to come to terms. So they're saying, look, he's got a little bit of money. Let him pay that, reduce what he owes you, give him a break. Okay. When the poor want to buy such things as mosquito nets, wadded clothing, and quilts, have pity on them and reduce the price. So this is interesting. There's a lot about the poor. If they're buying necessity, mosquito nets, so they don't get bitten alive, right? Wadded clothing, like old ragged clothing, reduce the price. Do not refuse to come to terms. So they've said that a couple times. Don't refuse to sell it to them. Take a lower price. Okay, so this is it's a little different. Okay, so let's look at our facts. So it's a Neo-Confucianism kind of how-to manual, kind of a Bible, right? And the manual instructs merchants to not overcharge, to exchange money fairly, to be generous to poor people, and forgive their debts and give them good prices. So I think this is the first time we've seen where a religion or a philosophy is telling them to be, generous to the poor. All right, so what would my description be? Okay, instead of saying document 7, I'm just doing the title of the book. Meritorious Deeds at No Cost is a Neo-Confucian manual. The manual tells merchants to not overcharge, to exchange money fairly, to be generous with the poor people by forgiving their debts and charging them less. So again, just the facts. So if you just do kind of your facts, a description of what's in here or a part of what's in here, you do that for 3 documents, you get a point. And so I always kind of encourage students, do it for all 7. It's a good way to start off how you're writing about the document, and then go into more of the inference or how does it answer the prompt. But this is a good way to, okay, I understand something in the document. I'm going to start off and then I'm going to segue into here. So inferences, Neo-Confucianism is still against merchants. Merchants are not compromising with the poor. So if we remember Neo-Confucianism, it was a blend of Buddhism and Confucianism. And so if we look back at document 1, that was Buddhism. It was very favorable towards merchants, especially if they're donating to the Buddhist temples. And then if we go back to I think it was document 2, Confucianism was not very favorable of merchants. So, and here I'm kind of like, well, I think, with this blending of Confucianism and Buddhism, they stuck with the Confucian side towards merchants, right? And then another inference, they're not compromising with the poor. They're like, pay everything. Okay, so how does this answer the prompt? So what would I kind of add in? So I put, once again, religion is shaping views towards merchants, right? So it's doing that, okay? And then I got to say what that view is. Although Neo-Confucianism is a blend of Buddhism and Confucianism, it holds Confucian beliefs on merchants because it has a manual instructing them on how to not cheat their customers. And so that's kind of and then you can add on. So it's kind of showing them in a negative light, right? And so that's how we're going with answering the prompts. And then I did not do outside information. So outside information, if you want to talk about Neo-Confucianism, explain what that is. While it's mentioned in the document, if you kind of explain what it is, you can probably, get a point for that. Okay, so what do we have next? All right, I know we're over time and y'all, it's getting late on a Tuesday night. So to kind of wrap this up, so you describe the evidence found in at least 3 documents by using your facts and inferences, right? So just describe what's happening, you can get a point. Now, support your argument or thesis by answering how does the document answer the prompt, as well as using your inferences. And you've got to do that for at least 6 documents to get that second point. I just tell mine to do it for all 7. That case, if you interpret one incorrectly, your other 6 are fine. And so I would do both, right? I would do both for all 7 documents if you have time. And if you're worried about, I can't flesh this out into more sentences, facts, inferences, or facts, how does it answer the question? You're going to end up with several pages of writing. And then write several sentences about some outside info, facts, people, places, names. So with this one, it could be about one of the religions, or I think we did the merchants at the kind of bottom of the social class. Anything you kind of know that's somewhat related to the prompt. And then you can get 3 points pretty easy. Okay, are there any questions? I know this was kind of, so if you have questions, you can type them in the chat or in the ask a question. Okay, so go ahead and do that if you have that. Now, what would your thesis statement be? Okay, so that was a different stream, but we've already supported an argument. We're kind of supporting a thesis, right, by answering how does the document answer the prompt, right? And so you can actually get these 3 points without a thesis statement if you're doing this, right? But our thesis statement would be, you want to go back to the prompt, right? So how do religious attitude or religious or cultural beliefs affect attitudes towards merchants? And so this one, I kind of would have a counter argument. So although some religious beliefs look favorably towards merchants, such as Buddhism, however, others view merchants as unfavorably, such as Islam, Christianity, Confucianism, Neo-Confucianism, something like that. And so I would probably have a paragraph about the favorable ones. So if there was the Buddhism, maybe add in a little bit from the Christianity and Islam about how, trade is natural, it's fine, you just can't be dishonest merchants. And then my bigger paragraphs would probably be the unfavorable, because I think there were more documents about that. But that, if you go back to Patrick's on the thesis, his stream on that, he's got a good little summary of each document. I know we went into great detail today, but that'll help you kind of formulate your paragraphs, right? And then you can look at the thesis that he came up with. And then tomorrow we have the contextualization point with Evan, and that's kind of his baby. He's really good with the contextualization. And then the next day, what would that be? Thursday, Melissa is going to do the analysis points. And it's not the unicorn point. You can get those points. Okay. Any questions? I feel like I've talked a lot. Okay. Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Sandra. Yeah. I didn't come up with the facts, inferences. How does this answer the question? I went to a training and I was like, oh my God, where has this been my whole teaching career? And once I really started using it, every student, their scores just keep going up every year, because it's something you can do. It makes the documents easier, and just trust yourself. If you think it's talking about something, it probably is, and just go with it and be brave. All right. Okay. Well, if there aren't any questions, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And sorry for the little interruption of my internet or whatever was happening. But thanks and have a good night.